Okay, this video is actually just going to be a basic review of the 3DS Max interface, but now we're going to look at Max 2011, and virtually everything is the same as it's been. However, between the transition of 2009 and 2010, there was obviously a big interface change in terms of color and icon use. The icons are still the same; they're just different. I guess a little bit to go a little bit more with the Vista and Windows 7 theming. So now we do have up here, we have the little icon, the Max icon, and that works a lot like most of the new Windows programs. If you click on that, you're going to see that there are several different options here. We have the new file, which is going to give us the ability to start anew. We also have open, which we can navigate out to a file folder. Save, we'll just save it as is. Save as will give you the opportunity to rename it or save a copy. And that's important if you're working with 2010. You'll want to save as and make sure you change the file extension to a Max 2010 file so that you can work back and forth. Import. As a review here, import, we can either import a 3DS model, and again that's extension .3ds, or we can merge one Max scene with another, and that is of course the .max file extension. And there's also a replace command where we can swap one with the other. Now we go backwards, we may want to save our file as a model so it can be opened, and this was until recently this was the alternative for working backwards, is to in 3DS Max 2010, if you wanted to take your work back into 2009, you had to export it as a model. You couldn't save it as a scene, so you'd lose a lot of the settings and your materials and all of that. Okay. So then we have several icons over here. We can create a new scene just by a quick link there, as well as open a file, save it. We can undo or redo. And last but not least, it's telling us where our project folder currently is. Then we have our standard application bar where all the text pull down menus are. And to do that, you select the word edit, and you have anything that's available will be dark. Anything that's gray, light gray, means that you need something in your scene to actually do this. Tools. We work with grouping a little bit, grouping things and ungrouping them. Adjusting your views, and of course one of the famous ones that we like to do is get rid of that view cube. So you can go to view cube and just take off the view cube. Create gives you a lot of different creation methods as well as some basic modifiers. Now again, you remember we have tons of different, this kind of converts all of the main modifiers into categories. Animation, we've done some work in here. When we get into bone tools and skinning with animation characters, we'll see that, as well as reactor we'll be working in here. Graph editors. Rendering, which we've done a lot of work in here thus far, especially with render setup, indirect illumination, exposure control. And remember last year we also used video post, which allowed us to add the glow effects. And then we also have batch rendering, which we'll be doing a little bit later on when we get into the animation, where we actually can set up multiple renderings in one thing. Customize, many of the different settings that we need to relock our interface if we accidentally bump something, as well as preferences. We also used unit setup so far to help us go in and change the units from the default to architectural. Now we kind of look at the main toolbar, and again, these are pretty much the same icons, and if you mouse over them, you're going to get what they are. But we will be using several more of them this year in Animation 2. So we have the select and link as well as the unlink, and again, that's linking two geometry objects together, and wherever one goes, the other goes, and it's the parent to child type setup. Our next one was bind to space warp, and we briefly saw that in independent lesson number 1 if you've done it. If not, it's a linking technique that will link a particle system to a space warp, and a space warp can be something such as gravity, drag, wind, that type of thing. And we'll do a lot of that in the next couple projects. We have our selection filter where we can change what we can select. So if we had multiple things in our scene, we could type in cameras and we would only be able to select cameras. So that way we don't accidentally start selecting things we don't need. And to get back out of that, you just turn on all. We have our select object, and this is probably more widely used than it needs to be. When you select an object, and I'm going to go ahead and create a box, a lot of people take the time to go out and grab this tool just to select it. Then they'll come back to their move tool to move it. And there's nothing wrong with that other than the fact that you are spending one extra click. And why is that? Because over here with the move, rotate, and scale, they're actually called select and move, select and rotate, and select and scale. So all you have to do is select the plus, click once, and now you can move. So that saves you from going select, select, move, select. Over here you can select from a list of objects in your scene. Right now we only have one box, so that shows. When you add multiple shapes and sizes and all different things in there, you're going to see the representation. You can select by name. We have the rectangular selection marquee, which if you click and drag makes a window, and anything that falls inside that window will become selected. Any icon that has a small notch to the right hand side here, such as this, if you hold down, you have multiple selections below that. And this one is kind of neat. It's like an airbrush. You pretty much go and select objects in your scene with a little airbrush, and that will make it work. Window crossing, anything that crosses that. So we have our move, our rotate, and our scale. Move moves it, rotate rotates it, and scale makes it bigger or smaller. We used angle snap toggle, and what that does is when you rotate, it rotates in 5-degree increments, keeping everything nice and straight. I know a lot of you struggle with actually trying to rotate something, and if it's crooked, then it won't model correctly. You can also set your settings in your preferences for more or less than 5 degrees. Coming down the line, we also have our mirror tool, and the mirror tool does just that. It mirrors the object to the other side, and we choose the axis that we want, and then we also say if we want to clone or not. So we made two boxes the same. And remember the difference here between a copy and an instance. A copy, if you manipulate one shape, the other one will not change. If you pick instance, both shapes will change at the same time. We also have layers here that we may be working with, and our material editor, the sphere with the disk. Remember that we have our slate editor, or I say the compact editor, and then if you hold down at the little clip there, you have the second one, which is the slate material editor that we looked at briefly. Render setup gives you all the different rendering setup. I'm in mental ray, so it gives me the indirect illumination along with the renderer and the common tab, which we'll use to save our files. Next to that, and some people got confused last semester thinking this was the render tool, and all that's going to do is bring up the current render window. Your last rendering will pop back up. So if you want to see what you rendered last time, obviously I have not rendered anything, so that will not show up. The button next to that is render production, and that will physically run a test depending on what viewport you're in.